We're here today to talk about the Max Environmental, what you need to know about Max Environmental and the petition to delist hazardous waste facilities. We are here with Mountain Watershed Association, and I'm going to introduce first Eric Harder. He is the Youghiogheny Riverkeeper for Mountain Watershed Association. Go ahead and take it away, Eric.
Hello and welcome. My name is Eric Harder, and I'm your Youghiogheny Riverkeeper. I work at Mountain Watershed Association, and we are a nonprofit dedicated to a fishable, swimmable, and drinkable Youghiogheny River. Additionally, we are a member organization of a Waterkeeper Alliance, and they're a global nonprofit set on improving water quality and holding polluters accountable. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Protect Penn Trafford, Jillian and Mary, for coordination and logistics, and your recent efforts to increase awareness about landfills and public health concerns of residents surrounding those landfills. Today, we want to focus on a specific regulatory action, and it's regarding Max Environmental, formerly known as Mill Service, and they have submitted a delisting petition, one for their Bulger facility and one for their Yukon facility. Both these facilities accept waste. Yukon facility treats hazardous waste, and historically Yukon has accepted hazardous waste and used it in their landfills. So when that landfill is then covered, leachate is still created from inside that landfill, and also leachate from their working landfill, which is landfill number 6, is also able to basically catch all that leachate from the entire site and treat it. And because that leachate percolates through that once hazardous waste, that leachate is considered hazardous waste itself. And so that goes to a treatment facility on site, and after it passes through their system, there is sludge created as a byproduct of the treatment process. Now, this sludge is then in turn deemed hazardous waste because it, again, has contacted hazardous waste in the past, that leachate. And so this is all termed as FO39 hazardous waste. Currently, Max takes this waste and transports it to a facility that is permitted to accept that FO39 hazardous waste. Max, at this point, is not permitted to dispose of it on site. If this delisting is approved, Max will be allowed to dispose of this sludge at their own operating facility or transport it to a non-hazardous residual waste landfill. And in our area, those are like Kelly Run Landfill, Westmoreland Sanitary, Moss Dollar, Chestnut Valley, places like that. And so during this press conference, we'd like to highlight some of the concerns with this delisting, but also the future expansion that has been proposed at Max at Yukon for landfill 7. And so this landfill would be permitted as a hazardous waste disposal site, not just a treatment facility. So Max does have the capability then of disposing of this sludge on site as it's currently permitted. And from there on, Jillian, I'd like to pass it on to our next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker will be Stacy Magda. She's the community organizer for Mountain Watershed Association. Go ahead, Stacy.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Eric, for explaining this complicated issue. Good morning, all. As Jillian shared, I am Stacy Magda, community organizer with Mountain Watershed Association. Over the past year and a half, I have had the opportunity to observe the operations at Max Environmental's Yukon facility and connect with many nearby residents, as well as those that have long since moved away, many due to health impacts from Max facility there. The stories I have heard are both shocking and frightening. Many in Yukon and beyond feel widely betrayed by industry and regulatory agencies as the outfall of this facility continues to plague their daily lives. They report noxious smells, tongue-numbing sensations, polluted water, and horrid air quality. Many complain of an ongoing fugitive dust that starves their ability to safely breathe in dry weather, often citing the only time they feel the air is safe is when it rains. The Mountain Watershed Association opposes MAC's request to reclassify the sludge generated from their treatment system as, quote, non-hazardous. We oppose this rulemaking in large part because of MAC's history of non-compliance that indicates that MAC cannot be trusted to undertake the monitoring and self-reporting activities necessary to ensure this sludge waste continues to be safely treated and stored, and transported for that matter. MAC's compliance history paints a clear picture of chronically struggling to comply with existing rules. Allowing them to have fewer requirements does not seem like it will result in a safer site or true representation of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or the citizens of Yukon. Further, MAC treats residual waste shown to be highly radioactive from oil and gas operations. While that waste is not currently classified as radioactive or hazardous, there is pending legislation that would change that classification. If this legislation is passed and the oil and gas waste is considered to be radioactive, the DEP's existing delisting evaluation would be inaccurate. A new independent evaluation would be needed to verify that the sludge does not also show evidence of elevated radiation, no matter where it goes. As it is highly unlikely that high radiation levels would not be discovered, the sludge would likely then evidence characteristics of a hazardous waste. And the delisting application materials and the DEP's evaluation would be incomplete and inaccurate. According to DEP's website, a conditional delisting means that MAC is required to test its sludge regularly, and the results should not show any characteristics of hazardous waste. As long as MAC's tests show there is no significant amount of hazardous waste, the sludge can be treated as non-hazardous. If the results do reflect characteristics of hazardous waste, then the delisting does not apply and MAC must treat the sludge as hazardous waste. If this delisting petition is granted, MAC will not be required to report the results of its sampling and monitoring of leachate sludge with the DEP. MAC must share their analysis only if monitoring reveals that certain hazardous wastes are present in levels that exceed the permitted limits. If that does occur, MAC must report any information relevant to that exceedance within 10 days of discovery. It's very simple and very easy to review a history of MAC's compliance. And it's very clear that that history shows a failure to monitor and report a swath of activities in the past. There is little reason to think that this monitoring and reporting would be any different. And the consequences would be dire if MAC incorrectly or inaccurately sampled and failed to report. If hazardous sludge is treated as non-hazardous, it could be buried on this site, irrevocably leaching into the soil and water, further damaging the surrounding environment and the community of Yukon and Bulger. A note on MAC's compliance history, as I previously mentioned. MAC has historically shown either a lack of ability or intent to consistently comply with the regulatory schemes under which it operates. For example, the Bulger and Yukon facilities have incurred over 110 violations by the DEP and EPA since 2009. There is a long list of these violations, and I will only touch on a few. The violations include hazardous waste containers leaking into the ground, failure to maintain leak detection, open burning on the landfill when there are homes and communities within yards of the landfill sites, improperly labeling waste or failing to label it at all, not properly closing containers of hazardous waste, failure to monitor and service leachate systems, not following required waste testing procedures, failing to provide DEP with required reporting on water pollution discharges, chemical releases, and compliance histories, and allowing uncontrolled fugitive dust emissions to leave the site. These are just a few of the violations issued. Many of the violations were issued, and the DEP also issued civil penalties and fines. These penalties have failed to have the desired deterrent effect, and instead, it seems they are treated as a regular cost of doing business for Max Environmental. Cat Lodge mentioned earlier about the noted savings that Max stated in their regulatory analysis form in this delisting petition. And I figured I'd go ahead and include that in my comment here so we can be very clear. These penalties for violations and non-compliance have been issued at least once a year, every single year from 2012 to the present. This is 10 years, a decade of fines being issued, of fines and non-compliance just being rolled in to the regular cost of doing business and regular operations at these facilities. The most recent violation was issued just 1 month ago for a failure to comply with NIPD's effluent limitations, a fine of $28,500. As I mentioned, since 2009, Max has been fined at least 25 times for a total of $850,000 in penalties. And as we also discussed, Max has stated it in its regulatory analysis form within this delisting that should the delisting petition be approved, it would save them an estimated $950,000 annually in transport and disposal costs. To reward Max by delisting hazardous waste at their facilities, knowing the facility's history of non-compliance, seems quite counterproductive to the interest of environmental protection. Max's inability or unwillingness to regularly comply with DEP's environmental standards should not be answered with a delisting of the hazardous waste it processes, effectively loosening DEP's oversight. The Mountain Watershed Association, those on this call, our members, we urge the EQB to not further destroy this community, Swickley Creek, or the Youghiogheny River watershed. We urge you to deny this delisting request. Thank you.
And so next we're going to have Diane Steck. She is a community representative. Go ahead, Diane.
Relying on a company who has failed to notify DEP of compliance violation to monitor their own waste streams to ensure that hazardous limits are not exceeded is akin to putting the fox in charge of the hen house. So I could go on for hours telling you about the problems that the people have experienced. And I think that this whole situation comes down to that. The EQB needs to act to protect the people who live around the Yukon facility and the Bulger facility, because these wastes are very damaging and are not limited to just the facility. Once they hit Swickley Creek, they go on into the river and can affect people downstream as well. So I urge everyone to send comments to the EQB and express your concerns. And I hope that EQB will do the right thing and deny this request for delisting. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Diane. And we're going to share the link at the end for the action, so folks can take action if they want to. Next, we're going to have Cat Lodge. She's a Bulger resident. She's going to be speaking.
Hello, my name is Cat Lodge. I live in Bulger, where Max has a residual waste facility on over 200 acres. This site was a former strip mine transformed into a landfill in about 1958. Since 1987, the site does not accept hazardous waste. The primary contaminants here from disposal are metals, nitrate in the groundwater, and chloride and manganese in surface water. Max Bulger has 3 impoundment areas, and their latest spot, impoundment number 3, has about 21 acres. It was first approved by DEP in 1991 for this impoundment 3 for residual waste, but this was well before Marcellus drilling came to town and T-norm waste was considered. Max is permitted to accept T-norm waste monthly, but once they reach a monthly limit, they are to turn away any more T-norm waste until the next month. So residents are relying on Max workers to be honest with their hauls, but Max has always had a problem with being honest and following state and federal regulations at both their Yukon and Bulger plants. Their compliance history speaks for itself. Max's delisting petition has us all very concerned about DEP making Max any, or giving Max any weakened oversight. We know their Yukon facility is at capacity, so we feel that the bigger picture here is to have Bulger become the receiving landfill for Yukon waste rather than Max addressing their ongoing problems, especially at Yukon. We fear they will simply move it to Bulger for long-term disposal with less DEP oversight. In July of last year, Governor Wolf initiated a testing for landfills of radiological contaminants due to the uptick in oil and gas waste disposals from fracking. We urged the EQB to require to spend at least 1 year testing of the leachate, which they wish to delist for radiological contaminants before the board makes any decisions on their petitions, or just outright deny it, please.
Thank you, Kat. And next, we're going to have Nurse Laura Dagley. She is the Medical Advocacy Coordinator for Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Hi, thank you, Jillian. So yeah, I'm Laura, and my focus at Physicians for Social Responsibility has been reviewing literature on and educating others about the health impacts from the oil and gas industry. And last year, we've been working with researchers at Wayne State University and UPMC, conducting a research project assessing levels of radon and radon decay products across communities impacted by oil and gas infrastructure in Pennsylvania. We've collected sets of air, water, sediment, and soil samples at different sites. And we visited many sites over the course of some really long sampling days, but the Max environmental site was the most memorable for me. Because of COVID, we had all been wearing masks while carpooling together. And we took our masks off once we were outside at Max and all had immediate physical reactions. I had a distinct metal taste in my mouth, like I had been chewing on like aluminum foil. Other researchers had the same experience. The amount of time it took us to sample at the site was probably less than an hour, but spending just that much time near the landfill was enough to make me feel sick. By the end of that time, I was nauseous, I had a horrible headache, and I had a nosebleed. And this was just from an hour of outdoor exposure to the stuff. So, you know, Diana and Kathy, like, I can't imagine what it had been like to live next to it. And I was not prepared or even expecting to have such a physical reaction while we were there, but from a medical and environmental perspective, it makes sense. The health impacts I had are actually really in line with what we'd expect someone to have if they were exposed to known chemicals from these sites. Things such as volatile organic compounds or VOCs, many of which are known carcinogens, can have health impacts even from short-term exposure. Benzene, xylene, formaldehyde, hydrogen sulfide, these are all known emissions. They have short-term exposure, can cause eye, nose, and throat irritation, nausea, headaches. They can cause asthma attacks, increase risk of heart attacks in those with heart disease, and cause acute bronchitis. Long-term exposure to these chemicals can lead to these chronic conditions like asthma and heart disease. And this is just from these chemicals being aerosolized and inhaled. But there are other health impacts other than breathing. These contaminants can also leach into water sources near sites like Max. And the EPA has found that health effects associated with like chronic oral exposure or chronic ingestion of these contaminants can lead to neurotoxicity, immune system effects, liver and kidney toxicity, reproductive and developmental toxicity, and also can lead to formation of tumors, according to the EPA. So this doesn't even cover the potential for radon exposure from oil and gas waste. While from our study specifically, our results are still being processed and analyzed, but our tentative conclusions do show that there are higher levels of radon found in water near landfills. And while at the site, we tested for radon in the air using a RAD7 electronic radon detector. And that does print immediate results. Again, I don't know the analysis of it, but normally for indoor air, you would need to run a RAD7 for at least an hour, and outdoor air concentrations are much less, expected to be much lower because of just all the ambient air. And so you would want to run it for a very long time. And we obviously weren't there at the site that long, but even in the short amount of time that we were there, we still got positive radon readings on the RAD7 detector. So, low level radiation exposure also increases cancer risk, with children being especially higher at risk. And so sort of with all my combined knowledge of the established research on this, on health impacts, my personal experience, and just the preliminary results from our study, I'm obviously very concerned about the health impacts that have already been had at that site and could continue to be had. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right. And James, if you could go, thank you, to the action page. So we have an action page set up. And so if you go to this bit.ly link, it will also be on Protect PT's action page as well. The deadline for comment is February 22nd. We're going to go ahead and take some questions from the press. And then Stacy, if you could go ahead and restate, we're going to start actually from the beginning with Eric, Stacy. I believe we were recording for Diane's comment, part of it, but we're going to go ahead and keep rolling and to get the video, because I think because there was an issue with Zoom connecting with our live feed software, we weren't able to capture all that. So if there are reporters on that would like to take themselves off of mute and ask some questions of our guests today, please do so now, and then we're going to go ahead and start the presentation with Eric again after that.
Hi, this is Reed Fraser at the Allegheny Front. You guys can hear me? Yeah, okay. I guess I'll take my camera on. So can someone explain how this company wants to, their facility is I don't know, it's classified as a hazardous or some sort of higher level landfill or liquid waste facility. What are you allowed to petition for? How does it work? Are you allowed to just say, we don't like this, we'd like a lower classification? And how are they justifying it? What are they saying is the reason for this? And I'll put myself on mute.
Thanks, Reed. I'll be happy to address some of that. First off, the title of Max at Yukon is a RCRA Subtitle C, hazardous and residual waste landfill. So right now, Yukon cannot bury hazardous waste at their facility. They have to treat hazardous waste. And once it is treated, then it is considered a residual waste, which they can bury in their own landfill. So currently, Max is not a permitted hazardous waste disposal site. They are permitted to treat the hazardous waste. With their landfill 7 expansion, that permit would include a hazardous waste disposal site. Right now, those regulation, that application is still in its pretty early stages. And so that's basically what their title is right now and how they're permitted. Other examples of maybe hazardous waste would be in that historically it's been pickle liquor, which is mixed with a solidifying agent, whether it be fly ash or soil or something that makes it solid, and then it's considered non-hazardous at that point. Same thing with liquid oil and gas waste. It's the state that it's in that creates it at its hazardous waste. And since this sludge comes in contact or originates from leachate, which contacts hazardous waste, all of it is basically shot under the umbrella F039, which is the classification of what that sludge waste is. And so this delisting would say this specific waste stream is no longer hazardous. And they've done this with other waste streams where they petition for a certain waste stream to be delisted. They've never delisted their own sewage sludge, but they have delisted other waste streams. There's been, I believe, arc furnace dust, other cathode ray tubes from TVs. You know, I'd have to get specific files about what they've delisted, but I know you can go online and type in DEP Max Environmental Yukon facility delisting, and it'll bring up several different renditions of what they've attempted to delist and what they've been successful with.
So this is the sludge from treating the leachate, from accepting the fracking solids, the cuttings and such.
And not just oil and gas waste is accepted at this facility. There's a wide range of waste that is either stored or treated on site. And historically, one of their landfills did accept hazardous waste. Again, currently, they're not permitted to dispose of hazardous waste at their landfill. Historically, one of the landfills that's capped, the leachate that is basically originates inside of that landfill is collected and sent to their wastewater treatment facility. Landfill 6, which is in current operation, not only the leachate that percolates through, but runs off the surface and is collected, all goes to the same drain and basically is considered a hazardous waste because at one point it comes in contact in one part of that life cycle.
Where does it go now? I'm sorry.
The sludge, are you most concerned about? It goes to a facility that accepts F039 hazardous waste. So from our conversation with the DEP, we did not, we weren't given the name of the landfill, but I think somewhere in the permit, it's about 80 cubic yards per year. So they would be storing this on site until they have a full trailer and then taking it to this facility.
So it's really not that much.
Over the
waste.
year, no, it depends on what you say is, it's a judgment call if it's a lot or not, and how. I want to answer your other part of your question too. So it really is a money saving aspect to their facility. What if it does get delisted? And for monitoring, this application goes through an approval process, which requires them to sample the sludge and to have it analyzed for all different kinds of heavy metals, basically hazardous toxins. And if it is below a recommended level by the EPA for a certain period of time or a certain number of samples, then it is considered, approved. And at this point, that is what DEP and EP have looked at those samples and said, yes, we feel that this is acceptable to be delisted.
Oh, okay. So that was my next question is
Yes.
So they're basically saying it's fine.
The DEP and EPA have both, I guess, given their go ahead, and that's why it's given to the EQB at this point. It would not be at the EQB unless EPA and the EPA both said, we've looked at the application and approve of it.
What is the EQB? It's not a court or a judge like system.
It is I would have to look at how they define it, but it is basically a committee who makes these decisions with regards to regulations that I think need more oversight or more public input than just a NPDES or National Pollutant Discharge Permit or something like that. So I think it's just the next up level of I guess regulation oversight.
Is this appealable through the Environmental Hearing Board?
That is a good question. We have not, I guess, looked into that.
Okay. All right.
Can I say something? I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe that the EQB will establish rulemaking, which has the potential to have other landfills follow the same path. So this is a pretty big deal. It's pretty, it's precedent setting. So I don't know that the Environmental Hearing Board would be the pathway to challenge it, because essentially what happens with a petition is you start off and you go through this process of what the DEP calls vetting, where it starts with, the DEP and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. They recommend to the Environmental Quality Board, and you get the sense that, okay, it's going through the proper channels and they're really taking a close look at this. But I've had issue with this because many of the members on those boards are in the waste departments. They're in industry that can benefit from this rulemaking. So this is really concerning for what it means to, I feel like we're going down a path where landfills are looking at delisting waste, but in the meantime, there's so much Marcellus waste coming to these landfills that already have a problem with the hazardous wastes from the past. And so now you're going to add to that the Marcellus waste without really looking at the radiological components of it. And if you go ahead and get this delisting and you set a precedent and you have this rulemaking, then we really have to play catch up with trying to really look at what the waste is. And by that time, we'll have it riddled throughout the state.
Thank you, Kat.
One thing that's strange that I don't really understand, and you guys might not be able to answer this, but I'm looking at the EQB website. And usually when the DEP proposes a rule, it's sort of like a rule about oil wells or a rule about, I don't know, paint or something. This is a rule about Yukon, the Bulger and Yukon landfills to delist them. That's strange. Like it's a specific rule about a specific place. And so why this seems to violate the notion that you can't make special rules for a certain company or a certain industry. What am I missing about this?
Not sure on that, but again, I would go back to the boards and the committees that have already looked at this, because as I said, they have a vested interest in this rulemaking, in my opinion. I mean, when I attended the SWAC meeting, there were a couple members that had to recuse themselves from the vote because they also have petitions before the same boards. And so, I'm sure they're hopeful it goes through, but that's not really giving an educated decision or making an educated decision, because you have a vested interest in this.
And I'd like to say really quick, in the place where we are right now, where we have a DEP that is not currently functioning properly as stated by the Attorney General's office and all of the work that has been done to bring to light the inadequacies of the DEP, I don't understand how we can, how people that are in charge of environmental quality can push for less oversight. You know, at the same time, the DEP earlier last year actually put out a press release regarding them testing for radium-226 and 228 in leachate at landfills. So on one hand, they're recognizing that this leachate contains, you know, radium-226 and 228, you know, mainly because of work of folks like Mountain Watershed, as well as Dr. John Stolz, who's actually here as well today, and the testing of the leachate at landfills, of the sludge at landfills, and these are landfills that are not specialized landfills like Max. On the one hand, we have, you know, regulatory agencies that are approving, you know, these types of things. On the other hand, you know, we see that time and time again, the environmental regulations is laxed and the oversight is lax. So it doesn't make any sense why this would be happening. And that's, I mean, that's my opinion, but Stacy, do you have anything to add to that, or Eric, or Diane?
I would like to make a comment. Reed, you know, you stated that it looks like it's a small amount of waste. The cumulative effects of what's already at these facilities is really the concern to the people who live there. There's no half-life to hexavalent chromium, to benzene, to the hydrocarbons that are there. And you know, yes, the radiation does have a half-life, but we'll all be long gone, as will most of our descendants, before that half-life time period occurs. So that's one point. The other thing that really disturbs me is that when you're looking at a volume of waste, and they're saying that a certain level, it's still hexavalent chromium or it's still arsenic, but if it's a certain percent, it's not, they call it non-hazardous, but the toxicity and the danger to humans is there regardless of the amount, especially when you're living next to a facility and exposed to it. You know, I mean, children, young children, they're exposed 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. This is unacceptable.
And especially when the processes and the materials have been consistently mishandled.
But I mean, I guess my comment on it being small was, if it's just a truckload a year, they could just truck it to wherever they have to truck it. Why are they going through all this? There must be some other reason. It must be more than just a truckload.
I think that Max in their petition identified that they would be saving an amount, a significant amount, to have to truck it away if they can just put it on site, you know, or put it closer, either in another landfill. And I forget what that amount is off the top of my head, but if I remember it correctly, it was roughly the same amount of money that they're spending on all their violations, their DEP violations.
You're correct, Pat. They estimated that they would save $950,000 annually in transport and disposal costs. While since 2009, Max has been fined 25 times for a total of $850,000 in penalties. You know, it just really seems quite counterproductive, and perhaps, you know, these civil penalties are really just looped into their operating costs. Sorry to interrupt you, Kat, but I just wanted to share that data.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but it really is just, you know, a simple cost-effective measure for Max that doesn't help any of the residents that have to live by these long-term facilities, because that's the key is the long-term disposal areas. Because in 2016, there was a report generated by DEP, you know, them looking at the Marcellus waste and the radiological contaminants, and it was kind of like dismissed in 2015, revised in 2016, but it was sort of like, there's not a problem. And, treating this stuff, this Marcellus waste with its T-norm waste or even the norm waste, the radiological stuff isn't a problem because it's treated and then it's disposed of. But there's a problem for the workers and anybody that's living near this, or if it's a long-term disposal place, then it becomes a problem. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about in Bulger and Yukon. We live near long-term disposal facilities. And yeah, the workers can even, if they don't live nearby, they can go away from it, but we can't. And then you run into the risks of it hitting all of our water. I'm not sure on Yukon, but I know in Bulger here, we still have a lot of people like myself on well water. And so it's a huge concern. And so to dismiss it, that it's not a problem as long as it's, not a long-term kind of disposal, but that's exactly what it is here.
I just saw that Dr. Stoles had raised his hand some time ago.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Reed. I just want to, don't go away. I just want to read you something that I had been working with someone who used to live down the street from Yukon. So I've been down there since 2019. And this is from a document that Max itself, it's one of their flyers. And it says specifically, hazardous waste. As one of the first providers of hazardous waste transportation, treatment, and disposal services, Max maintains a tradition of safe, secure, bonded, and reliable hazardous waste management. Our streamlined waste approval process and processing capabilities make Max your ideal choice for responsive and cost-effective waste management solutions. Their Yukon facility in particular, and I'm just going to mention one, RCRA wastes, including corrosives, arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, lead, selenium, silver, and waste acid spent pickle liquor. The point is, this was a hazardous waste site, and now they want to be delisted. And one of the documents, again, we've been analyzing discharge and stuff like that, and I think mountain water keepers have some data that I looked at where the amount of arsenic in the discharge was 2.9 grams per liter, or milligrams per liter, excuse me, which is huge. I mean, they've been taking arsenic and it's in their leachate. And now they want to be delisted so that the DEP doesn't have to monitor them and they can self-report. And that's really what the concern is. They've taken this stuff, they make money taking this stuff, and now they want a free, pass on actually properly getting rid of their liquid and solid wastes. So that's all I wanted to, that was my comment. And I have a lot of data if you want to talk off.
Yeah, can I just jump? Yeah, can I just jump in? I'm looking at the delisting application, I guess, or the request, and they're saying that the constituent concentrations are below certain thresholds. Antimony, arsenic, they have thresholds for milligrams per liter of each of these contaminants. So that I'm sure they'll say that this is fine, right?
On their permit, they do point out, the samples that they did analyze and returned into the DEP as results were all below those thresholds. But just to point out, to go along with what John Stoltz was saying, between 2005 and 2009, when this facility had a renewal of their NIPD's permit, arsenic was not ever labeled or listed as one of the parameters regulated by the DEP. So from 2005 to 2009, when that permit was officially active, arsenic was potentially being put into Swickley Creek unregulated. Just to add to that, from 2009 to 2019, Max Environmental still used that same overdue NIPD's permit, which had basically been given the stamp by DEP, said just keep on using this same permit because we don't have an updated renewal for you. So between 2005 to 2019, maybe even 2020, Max was potentially releasing arsenic at unregulated levels, not even permitted on their NPDES permit. And so from now, DEP realized that they should have had arsenic on their parameters for this whole time, and now it is on their NPDES permit. But the same kind of thing, this oversight for 15 years allowed unregulated arsenic, potentially unregulated arsenic inputs into Sewickley Creek. And so when we transfer over, Max says, oh no, we got this new waste stream. We think it's going to have this effect on our sewage sludge. How long does that red tape take for DEP to analyze what that new waste stream is going to do to the sewage sludge? All the time being, that sewage sludge is being taken to a more local landfill, which has even less monitoring requirements for some of these constituents. So it's not just this small delisting. I think it's the whole chain reaction and the whole historical and future operations that depend on DEP oversight. And are they doing that good of a job that the community actually is feels protected? And again, I don't live in the community, but I feel similar responses to air quality when I do go there for sampling, for visits or anything like that. So I can stand next to what Laura was saying, how she felt physical impacts immediately.
Just to make, okay, sorry, I see some hands raised, but just to make it clear, even if this application is denied, there would still be accepting all this frac waste and processing all the other stuff that they are doing. They just would have to truck this sludge somewhere else.
And it would require increased monitoring as well. So if it's basically they're sampling for what they're accepting. So if DEP gets word that they're accepting different waste, then they have to sample and report on different, outputs from that.
I wanted to ask a question, since John Stoltz is on the line too, or maybe you all know this, but the testing, the parameters that they used, that Max used and submitted to the DEP accepted, did any of that include the characteristics of the Marcellus waste stream that they bring in? In other words, are they looking at the 226 and the 228, radium 226 and 228? Was any of that tested? Because if not, then something that Eric said was, they're asking to collect something that was supposed to be going to a hazardous disposal place. They want to collect it and send it to a facility that is not set up to accept waste that could possibly have this hazardous component to it. And, that all along is troubling, not only for the 2 Max facilities in this delisting, but if Max takes it to any other landfill, it's just going to open the floodgates of accepting waste that we really don't have a characterization of, especially the radium 226 and 228 components. And I mentioned this, that why is there not any consideration, or maybe there is with EQB, but there really needs to be consideration to what Governor Wolf presented back in July last year, that okay, hold on, landfills, we need to start checking for radiological components. That should apply to this as well. And I'm fearful that because this petition was put in place, or any of the other landfills that have a petition in, that there will be like a grandfather clause where it says, oh, we have this list of petitions, so we don't really have to check for the radium or anything radiological because of the Marcellus waste stream going into the landfills. So I really wish that they would I wish there would be a focus on the fact, and that was kind of like a little blip, it really didn't get much coverage, that Wolf said we're supposed to be looking at the landfills and the radiological components. So why are we even talking about a petition to delist any part of Yukon or Bulger's waste stream? Because we know they both accept Marcellus waste. So let's put a pause, let's check it, let's do a year study of it. And then, you know, because I don't think in their parameters to check to see if their leachate is acceptable, I don't think they were checking for radium 226 or 228. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm going to ask Eric if he did a mountain watershed test for radium 226 and 228.
From soil near the outfall, I believe we have. I could not speak on the results. And I believe we also did the discharge outfall water itself, but it did not have any indication of elevated levels.
I could speak a bit to that.
Right.
We have been conducting a quite extensive soil and sediment sampling program throughout Yukon and near the facility. We are finding traces of those materials. At this time, we're still working through the full analysis through certified labs. And unfortunately, I'm not able to divulge much detail on that, but we have been conducting and looking through those parameters.
And Stacy, when do you think that those results will become public?
We're hopeful through mid to end year. We're going through the steps of processing these samples through several labs, including certified labs, before we share our final reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. And so we ask folks to take action by submitting a comment. You can do so very easily online with the bit.ly linked here. You could also go to protectpt.org/action and to our action page, and we also have that listed there as well. The deadline to comment is February 22nd. And again, as Stacy stated, the reason why Max is pushing for this is because it would save them annually $950,000. However, their fines for noncompliance to laws that they are already mandated to comply to, that they are not complying to, would if they could just comply with the current laws, then they would actually save themselves a lot more money. So bringing more risk to the community for a money-saving, cost-saving measure does not seem like it is in the mission of the agencies that are charged with protecting us as humans in our environment, our safety and well-being. And so we ask the Environmental Quality Board, as well as the DEP, to take a second look at this, and for the EQB to not delist this site. Eric, do you have any comments before we hop off today?
No, just look forward to more of these about Max Environmental and the different projects and permits that they'll be applying for. This is a facility that has been here a long time, and we understand that hazardous waste has to go somewhere, but also regulations, setbacks, proper monitoring also has to be followed, so that really our public health is the main concern here.
That's right. So please take a little bit of time to fill out the action form online at this link listed here, or at protectpt.org/action. And the comment deadline again is February 22nd. If you live in Westmoreland County or Washington County, this should concern you, because this is harming the communities that live around the landfill, and it's my understanding that this is just the beginning, that this could open the door for other things as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Apologies for the audio issues in the beginning, but we will continue to bring you information that's important to the community. And thank you to Mountain Watershed Association for bringing this to light and all your work on this. Take care. All right. The broadcast is over.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
That's great.